Hello guys, I'm Kerry from Kerry Tries It, and in this video I'm gonna watch the Stanford prison experiment. Was one of the most disturbing experiments ever. One, two, three.
In August of 1971, Professor Philip Zimbardo began an investigation into the power dynamics that exist between guards and inmates in a prison setting. The object of the Stanford prison experiment was to determine if it was the acquisition of power that made guards turn brutal, or whether brutality was actually intrinsic to human nature itself. The notorious experiment that ensued would kick off decades of academic controversy and suggest some very dark things about the nature of humanity. Today, we're going to take a look at why the Stanford prison experiment might be the most disturbing study ever conducted. During the 1970s, both the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps were interested in learning about the hierarchies of power in military prisons. Accordingly, the U.S. Office of Naval Research issued Philip Zimbardo a grant to study the relationships between prison guards and prisoners. The objective would be to determine if those relationships were shaped more by the prison environment or the personalities of the guards. The grant would be used to create a mock prison environment in which to conduct the experiment and to pay the participants. The Stanford prison experiment started with an ad Zimbardo placed in the classifieds. It read, "Male college students needed for psychological study of prison life, $15 per day for 1 to 2 weeks. 70 people applied. The applicants were interviewed and asked to take personality tests.
Wow.
Anyone who had a criminal record or record of abusing narcotics was eliminated, as was anyone who displayed personality disorders, physical disabilities, or psychological problems. Ultimately, 24 college students, all white and all male, were selected to participate. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into.
The prisoners were arrested and booked by real cops.
I was the first one to be picked up, so they put me in a cell. They locked me in there in this degrading little outfit.
Hey, I don't want anybody left.
$15 per day, but for how many days do they have to stay? They don't go home to sleep, I don't think so. And what if they want to stop experiment? What do they say? Can they?
I've never screamed so loud in my life. Never been so upset in my life. It was an experience of being out of control.
The Stanford prison experiment.
Zimbardo and his team randomly divided the students into 2 groups, prisoners and guards. There were 12 of each category, 9 that were active participants and 3 that were alternates. On August 17, 1971, the experiment began when the 9 prisoners were arrested by actual police officers from the Palo Alto Police Department. Each person was taken into custody, then had their mugshots taken before being fingerprinted, blindfolded, and moved into a holding cell. Finally, they were taken into a mock prison that had been set up in the basement of Stanford's Jordan Hall. The fake prison felt very real. The researchers who created it had consulted with prison officials and ex-convicts before designing it. The cells were built in a space that was normally used as a laboratory. Each cell had a barred door, a cell number, and room for 3 prisoners. Other touches included a solitary confinement cell that had been created in a closet, and a rule that prisoners had to be blindfolded before being taken to the bathroom.
We put prison doors on each of 3 office cells. In the cells, there was nothing but 3 beds, and there was actually very little room for anything else because they were very small. And here we had solitary confinement, which we call the hole. And in the hole was the place where prisoners would be put for punishment. It was a very, very small area. When you closed the door, it was totally dark.
Oh. My question is, and I forgot my question, did they all realize that it's just an experiment? But because, like, okay, I'm getting paid for being in here, me too, and they can just sit in there and, like, be normal. And guardians as well. But if they were told that they're gonna be taken in real prison and they really believe that other people are real prisoners, then yeah, wow, crazy. $15, it's nothing for that kind of stuff.
All the guards wore military uniforms, and we had them wear these silver reflecting sunglasses. And what it does is you can't see someone's eyes, and so that loses some of the humanness, the humanity.
Humanity in eyes.
In general, we wanted to create a sense of power. That is, the guards, as a category, are people who have power over others. In this case, power over the prisoner.
A coin toss determined who would be prisoner and
To avoid
guardian.
selection bias, participants were assigned to be either prisoners or guards based on the results of a coin toss. Very different fates awaited each respective group. Guards were given real prison guard uniforms, complete with nightsticks and whistles. Many guards even donned mirrored sunglasses, which were meant to prevent eye contact with the prisoners, or maybe just to look like Boss Godfrey from Cool Hand Luke. Prisoners, on the other hand, were stripped, deloused, and dressed in sandals and an ill-fitting numbered smock. They weren't issued any underwear, but they were given nylon stocking caps, which they were asked to wear in lieu of having their heads shaved. Once dressed, a chain was placed on each of their legs. Prisoners were only addressed by their number and had to refer to themselves and the other prisoners in the same way. It was a recipe for dehumanization and oppression.
Almost immediately, the guards became so...
Zimbardo himself served
So-
as superintendent of the prison, and researcher David Jaffe played the warden. The two were responsible for instructing the guards and laying down the scope of their duties. First and foremost, the guards were told to maintain order. To this end, they were allowed to use any means necessary, short of physical violence. Things that were permitted included harassment, the withholding of food, and the deprivation of privileges at the guards' discretion. The guards, unlike the prisoners, were also allowed to work in shifts. The shifts, which each required 3 guards, lasted 8 hours. Off-duty guards didn't have to be at the prison, but were asked to remain on call in case of an emergency.
So
It
they
was
could
prison
go
to me. It
home
still
and
is a
live
prison to
their
me.
normal
I
life.
don't look on it as an experiment or a simulation. It's just a prison that was run by psychologists instead of run by the state.
I was 20, and that September I was going to college, and it would be nice to have a summer job, but there sure wasn't a lot of time left. And I looked in the want ads, and I found this thing which was just going to fit. It was just 2 weeks.
Once you put a uniform
Poor
on
guy.
and are given a job to keep these people in line, you really become that person. Once you put on that khaki uniform, you put on the glasses, you take the nightstick.
I was on summer break from my first year in college, and I was looking for a job. Had to choose between that and making pizzas. That sounded like a lot more fun.
A lot more fun. Prisoners, rebellion, guards, psychological tactics.
On the first night, the guards decided to use a whistle to rouse the prisoners from their sleep for a head count at 2:30 a.m. Some of the prisoners didn't take the head count seriously, and the guards punished them by making them do push-ups. After a head count, the prisoners had already had enough and decided to rebel. On what was only the second morning of the experiment, they removed the numbers from their uniforms, pulled off their stocking caps, and barricaded themselves inside their cells using their beds. When the next shift of guards arrived in the morning, they were alarmed to find the prisoners yelling curses at them from their cells. They requested reinforcements and made plans to quell the uprising. They brought in the on-call guards, and the night shift volunteered to do extra duty. It was only day 2, and things were already getting ugly. In order to get the cell doors open, the guards used fire extinguishers to force the prisoners away from the barricades. Once that was accomplished, they rushed into the cell, grabbed the prisoner, and stripped them naked as a jaybird. The birthday suit prisoner was then placed into solitary confinement. While they were there, the guards would remove the bed from their cell, meaning the prisoner would have to sleep on the floor when they returned.
But now I understand, probably before they got there, they had to sign that they can't get out of there unless 2 weeks are ended. I think so.
Initially, I was stunned. I didn't expect a rebellion because not much happened. I mean, it wasn't clear what they were rebelling against, but they were rebelling against the status, rebelling against being anonymous, against having to follow orders from these other students.
Once the rebellion was controlled, the guards had to figure out how to prevent another from happening without having to have all 9 guards perpetually on duty. The solution was to divide and conquer. The guards deemed one of the cells the privilege cell. Well-behaved prisoners were placed in the privilege cell, where they would get their uniforms and beds back, and even get special meals. The other prisoners were not only denied of all these things, but were deprived of their normal food rations. After a few hours, the guards would randomly move the prisoners around. The idea was to create confusion and sow the seeds of distrust among the inmates. And it worked.
After the rebellion, the guards quickly became sadistic.
In the wake of the uprising, conditions deteriorated fast. The guards started making a point of dehumanizing the prisoners by making them call out their identification numbers. Prisoners were also forbidden from using the bathroom at night and were forced to use a bucket in their cell instead. Soon the guards stopped emptying the buckets, reasoning that the bad smell was simply another punishment for misbehavior. Despite what Zimbardo described as frequent reminders from the staff, the guards grew increasingly aggressive.
We made it a point to not give them any sense of comfort or what to expect, that anything could happen to them at any time, including being rousted from their sleep at any hour and forced to stand up in a line and have me hurl insults at them and make them do exercises. When you interrupt people's sleep, they tend to become a little disoriented. And since there was no daylight in the prison, they had no idea whether it was night or day. I think that I was the instigator of this whole schedule of harassment.
The most egregious behavior occurred when the staff wasn't paying attention, which became stressful and frustrating for the prisoners. The prisoners, as a result, became increasingly submissive, and the experiment was about to claim its first victim. After only 36 hours, prisoner Doug Corpy began suffering from what was described as acute emotional disturbance, disorganized thinking, uncontrollable crying, and rage. The guards used this opportunity to try and coax him into becoming a snitch.
I said, well, I can see to it the guards don't hassle you personally, and in return, all I would like is some information from time to time about what the prisoners are doing. So essentially I'm saying, I'd like you to be a snitch, an informer. And I said, think it over, and if you still want to leave, fine.
I feel so fucked up inside. I feel really fucked up inside. You don't know. I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. I can't say that. I'm fucked up. I don't know how to explain it. I'm all fucked up inside. Now!
But when his erratic behavior continued, the staff realized Doug was in genuine distress and needed to be released from the experiment.
Almost immediately, participants became their roles to
On the sixth day, Zimbardo convened a mock parole board, which was headed by one of the experiment's prison consultants. Inmates who believed they deserved parole would be allowed to present their case to the board. It was during these presentations that Zimbardo, along with the other researchers, began to theorize that the prisoners no longer saw themselves as participants in an experiment, but as real prisoners. According to Zimbardo, the prisoners had internalized their crimes, as well as their roles as inmates. As for the guards, he came to identify three different types. Tough but fair guards, who followed prison rules. Good guys, who did little favors for the prisoners and never punished them. And finally, guards who appeared to thoroughly enjoy the power they wielded. Zimbardo felt this last group was hostile, arbitrary, and inventive in their forms of prisoner humiliation.
They escalated, again, the level of control, the level of dominance, the level of humiliating behavior.
I remember I was speaking with guys who've been like as soldiers in army, and I'm like, when you get in there, and people who are already there, like, I don't know those names, but like half a year or something, they're taking advantage of you. They're like torturing you. Would you do the same in a half a year? They would say, yes, I did. And I'm like, why? When they grew and when newcomers in here, they say, because I went through it and they have to went through it. They have to go through it. So that means it's like circle that we can't stop. Mechanism that like, and from another side you're thinking it can be better place. All of you can be better, but
Zimbardo concluded that most people were ultimately willing to fulfill whatever role they were given in a respective social setting. He even admitted that he had internalized his role as superintendent over his role as a psychologist.
Prisoners turned on one another.
At one point, Zimbardo brought in a real priest to talk with the prisoners. It was during this conversation that prisoner 819 broke down sobbing. He was so hysterical that the staff agreed to take him to a doctor. The other inmates, for their part, turned on 819.
While I'm interviewing 819, and saying, okay, it's all over. Thank you for your participation. I'll give you money for the whole 2 weeks, even though you're leaving early. He hears
even if you're leaving early.
819 did a bad thing.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
You had to give him bonus. It's crazy.
Prisoner 819 did a
And he said, I can't leave. And he's crying. And he says, I can't leave. I said, what do you mean you can't leave? He said, no, I have to go back because I don't want them to think that I'm a bad prisoner. And that's when I really flipped out. That in such a short time, a college student's thinking could become so distorted. I said, you're not a bad prisoner. You're not a prisoner. And this is not a prison. And it was this thing where he opened his eyes. It was just really like a cloud being lifted.
Researchers offered to send him home, but 819 surprisingly refused, saying that he couldn't leave because the other inmates had labeled him a bad prisoner. Zimbardo was forced to intervene. Pulling the student aside, he forcefully reminded him that he was not really an inmate and that the experiment was not really a prison. The prisoner is alleged to have stopped crying and looked at Zimbardo like a small child awakened from a nightmare. After that, 819 agreed to leave.
The 2 weeks experiment only lasted 6 days.
On the 6th day, a recent PhD recipient named Christina Maslach was brought in to interview the prisoners. Horrified by what she saw, she confronted Zimbardo, asking him how he could see what she had seen and not care about the students who were suffering. According to Zimbardo, he quickly realized she was right. It was at that moment that he decided to prematurely end the study. Later, he would reflect on his own behavior and claim that it wasn't until his discussion with Maslach that he realized how deeply he had internalized his role at the prison.
I was blindfolded and then stripped and supposedly deloused.
He came into a madhouse, full blown. All of us had gradually acclimated to the increasing level of aggression, the increasing powerlessness of the prisoners, the increasing dominance of the guards. And he comes in and says, what's happening here to the other prisoners? And they said, hey, you better not make trouble. It's really terrible. It's a real prison. And he says, I'm out of here. I don't want to. And they said, no, they're not, you can't leave. Once you're here, you're stuck. This is a real prison.
Well, since you got your hands in the air, why don't you play Frankenstein? 293, you can be the bride of Frankenstein. You stand here.
Ultimately, he concluded he was thinking like a prison superintendent rather than a research psychologist. Both the ethics and conclusions of the Stanford prison experiment remain highly controversial. A 2018 book by French academic Thibault Letixier dismissed the entire thing as nonsense. He argued that the guards had been told what results they were supposed to produce and were advised and guided by Zimbardo and his staff the whole way through. So what do you think? How would you have fared in the study? Let us know in the comments below.
I think that's cool to have studies like this, but they have to, it should be more people who are engaged in this, not just one guy who already got his role and messed up what is okay, what not. More people should care, take care of experiments like this first, and second, people should have red flag, I want to leave, because it's crazy. But yeah, that's very interesting. Good. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget about like, subscribe, and support me on Patreon, Venmo, buy me a coffee. Here the link for Amazon wishlist. Write me in comments if you agree with these experiments. Do you think that they have to be continued or hopefully not? And happy Thanksgiving. If you wanted a painting, please write to my Gmail, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.